TimeOut with TIMO.
Open up your mind and let me in. Open up your mind and let me in. Open up your mind and let me in.
All right, welcome back to TimeOut with TIMO. I'm joined by my second guest of the evening, one of the best magicians in America, folks. He's humble, but I like to say it. Magician Brian Robert. How you doing, Brian?
Doing well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so you're gonna perform for us tonight.
I am.
Well, man, let's talk a little bit.
Okay,
Right?
sounds
So
good.
you're from Toronto,
I'm originally from Toronto, yes.
okay?
Yes.
What was it like up in Toronto?
Cold.
Cold?
That's why I got into magic, because in Canada, you need to look for something that's inside.
Okay.
So magic was a great, it's nice and warm, that's what I remember.
Okay. So as a boy, what did you do out in Canada, man? Just be,
I was like a typical Canadian. I mean, I played hockey, I had a brother, we fought a lot, but, playing hockey. I played baseball, I played basketball, you name it, we did a lot of sports together. My father was a policeman, so he was an Ontario provincial policeman, so that was interesting. We didn't have parties or get in trouble or speed or anything. We towed the line, because my dad was a big guy, and so it was an interesting, and actually my great-grandfather was a policeman, a bobby in England as well, so that's what my dad wanted to be one. So he was inspired by the family to be a policeman, which is kind of interesting. And my mom worked at General Motors, which is what a lot of people do in Canada. They work at General Motors, especially around the Toronto area. And she didn't do that for long, and then she sort of raised my brother Gary and I. And that was it. And it is really cold there. I want to be honest about that. The weather is actually horrible. Because it's two seasons up there. It's cold and then kind of hot for like a month, and then cold again. And here it's 3 definite seasons, which I know we both love. You're from Illinois, so yeah. So I actually love it down here, and I did enjoy my time up there. I studied design when I was up there, and had a great opportunity to be in the design industry. And I found it tonight, but I still love talking about it.
Okay.
And it has helped my other business greatly. So.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
wow. So before you got to design, what was the first job you had when you got out of school? Like college? What did you do?
My first job at college, I'm really lucky, because we had a work placement program. And there was a famous designer named Don Watt, who is, if you walk into a Home Depot here in America, that's designed by Don Watt.
Oh, wow.
If you walk into a Safeway on the West Coast, that's designed by Don Watt.
Oh, wow.
So a student opening came up, and my teacher said, "Hey, you want to try out?" I was kind of nervous. I'll be honest with you, I grew up a very shy person, very nervous, very shy. I was not like you probably wouldn't have thought I was going to be a performer,
No.
but I would always say yes to things like that. So I just said yeah, and I was nervous, and I walked into this interview, and a day later they said, "You've got the student role." And that meant that I had to do a certain amount of time during that final year training with the Watt Design Group. And I literally sat beside a draftsman and watched him for the first couple of weeks.
Wow.
And just crazy how much you can learn just from doing that.
Absolutely.
And then finally they gave me my chance. Well, the opportunity came at the end of that. They said, when you graduate, call us, you've got a job. So I finished off the final year knowing I had work, and that was rare. I mean,
Absolutely.
in class, not a lot of people had that opportunity, so I was lucky.
Yeah.
And I took full advantage of that. I called them right away and said, "I'm done, let's do this." And I stayed there for 13 years at the Watt Design Group, became friends with Don Watt, hung on every word, took every note I could. And then later, when I ran my own firm, that helped me. That I remembered everything Don used to do.
Oh, wow.
And more importantly, I remembered along the way, you leave there and you get another job, and that path taught me what not to do. So I started looking at things like, I probably won't do that if I'm in a leadership position, and I didn't. And I just kept learning what not to do until I got to my role, my sort of dream job of running a studio. And that's what I did. My first job, though, I would say, let me backtrack, because my first job was a magician role. I still have the pamphlets I had made at school. You know, I don't know if, I'm old, I feel old now. But they had this machine that you'd turn it, and it would copy with sort of a purpley blue ink on other papers that would come out. This is, like, there wasn't I don't know if my school had a photocopier. I'm from Oshawa, Ontario, it's kind of small.
Different out there.
So they made me, you know, probably 20, but to me as a little kid, it probably seemed like 100 pamphlets. And I walked around the neighborhood and gave, it said, Brian Robert, magician for kids' parties, in handwriting.
So what, but,
Like, it wasn't graphically well done.
but what started your interest in magic, especially that young?
Yeah, so, my mom, I had an interest already. Doug Henning was on TV, David Copperfield was on TV, Lance Burton was on TV, the guys with the Tigers were on TV. And I was mesmerized. I would finish my homework early and lay on the floor in front of the TV and just wait for them to come on. And so my mom realized I had this interest. She realized there was a magician that lived down the street from us, literally 5 or 6 houses down. And she packed up a couple of my magic things one day and walked down there with me, knocked on the door. She didn't know the family. I guess one of her friends told her. And introduced me to the magician. She said, my son is interested in magic. Would you mind showing him something?
Yeah.
And he became my teacher for 15 years.
So
my magic teacher.
How old was this guy at this time? Was he retired, or he just?
No, I'd say Alistair, his name was Alistair Younger. I'd say Alistair was 20-something, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it was a trusting era. You know, my mom was okay with me hanging out with Alistair. He took me into Toronto, which was probably an hour car ride, to the 2 magic stores that were in Toronto, which to the little kid in me, these might as well have been as big as this room. They weren't, they were tiny, but I mean, you can imagine the impact. Bought me a couple tricks. Yeah, I don't know whether my mom gave him money or what. Bought me a couple of tricks. And then introduced me to magicians that were local. He knew them all. He was a magician.
So do you think that it's something that, I know anyone can learn it, but you think it's something you gotta have a kind of a knack for, kind of a natural talent to be able to pick it up?
You know, I've taught kids at a kids camp called Sorcerer's Safari. I did it for a few years, and it was sort of in the northern part of Ontario in the woods. And, you know, these are kids with an interest in it. They could definitely be taught it. Some of them theatrically, maybe from a stage presence standpoint, had better presence that way, just naturally, as we all, you know, do, at different levels of that. But they certainly took classes every day. My youngest son, Matthew, was one of them. And my son's a juggler. He's a fantastic juggler. Was inspired only by seeing a juggler up there. He didn't take juggling classes while he was there, but just saw one of the juggler instructors and then started learning on the internet and stuff. And he's a fantastic juggler with natural ability. So he needs to open my shows, I need to tell him. Or close my shows, one of the two, but that's what it did for those kids, you know. And so I think it can be taught. And then I just think it's, you know, it's a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of information, and then they either run with it or they don't. My oldest son was interested in it for half a minute. And then Daniel likes to build motorcycles and cars and stuff, so that's about as far away from magic as you can get.
Either engines or magic, and
yeah.
just one at a time.
So, but yeah, it definitely can be taught. You know?
Wow. So when did you decide that you wanted to just pursue magic, you know, full time? Like, because do you still do any design, like
No.
consult anything? You know?
No. The most I design now is like my nameplate and my library shows. I design all of the graphics and the tricks for those shows, and my graphic skill helps me with that immensely.
But I'm saying, but no one from your team ever reaches out to you and say, hey, can you?
They did initially, and I did a few assignments initially, and then said, I need to shift focus and have that focus be all about magic and my business, and see if I can kind of put that same energy and interest that I had in art and design into magic, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And it happened just before the pandemic. My wife said, "Are you happy?" She probably sensed I wasn't happy, probably because I was saying I wasn't happy. And I said no, and she said, "Well, are you ready to make the move on the house?" We were looking at a few houses here, and I said, "Yep, let's do it." I thought for maybe half a second, and then I said, "Yes, let's do it."
So how does the pandemic affect you? I mean,
it just, you know, it gave me a really, really good excuse to shut things down. in terms of the office and in terms of the work, because everyone went home. So the office really wasn't operating like an office anymore, and clients went by the wayside. They just simply couldn't afford our services anymore. And things started to dissipate, you know, so it
you
was a
think that
little
helped
bit
you
easier.
put more focus into magic?
Well, it was a lot easier for me to shut that down and then decide, let's do it. Let me try this full-time, which was never a full-time thing since I was 10 years old. And I mean, I had a full-time job running a studio. I was an owner. And I was, you know, I went on a trip to Japan for a week to perform. Like, it was just, I had this weird double life where I had to forget about all that and then go be a magician guy.
So what was that like in Japan? What was that experience?
A fantastic experience. I mean, you know, just an appreciation for the art of magic, an appreciation for the arts itself. Not that we don't, but just on a level that's palpable.
Okay.
And such a foreign land for little Brian from Oshawa, Ontario. It was incredible. You know, I had an entourage of 4 people. That's just the way they do it. So I showed up to my hotel, and by the way, if you've never been to Japan, and I can't remember when, I went at the height of the heat. And I thought somebody had a heat lamp on me the entire time I was there. That's how hot it was. I saw Japanese people sweating. Like, it was just, don't you live here. But this was hotter than you could have, and this is Atlanta. So we know hot. But this was on a level I can't even explain. So just even things like that, it was like, whoa, what an interesting experience that is. I've never experienced that before, especially growing up in Canada. And we performed at the Japanese Officers Club in downtown Japan, which is massive space, you know. And my favorite story from there was walking in and seeing this lineup along the hallway. It was a typical hotel, you know. And I turned to the folks that were with me and I said, who's here? They said, you. They said, you're here. And I went, this is unbelievable. How do they know? You know, like what? They just did a really, you know, I was on a poster and they really did a good job of promoting. And so that was the first time I felt like, oh, wow.
I'm the guy.
I guess I'm a performer now.
I'm the guy now.
Yeah, and I was lecturing and performing and teaching, and I had one of the greatest experiences of my life, you know. And it's funny because I was doing a lot of coin magic. So you get up to the security people at the airport, and stacks of coins in your luggage look like metal bars. You know, they don't know the difference. So I was stopped immediately, and he said, "What's up with all of the metal in your luggage?" I said, "Oh, I'm a magician." And they're like, "Okay," and I said, "They said there's a lot of coins there." They said, "Show me something." So I'm holding up this long line in Toronto, doing coin magic. I look over at this guy, he's like, you know, I'm like, I'm sorry, there's security. I gotta do what I gotta do. And so that's how it started. And, you know, coming back from that was just unbelievable. And I said, oh, maybe this is something I could do.
Oh, yeah.
That was a realization moment.
When they saw your poster, they was like, that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in that moment, I did represent Canada. I was the only Canadian to do that show. So that was a thrill. You know.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Alistair.
Thank
you,
That's
Alistair.
awesome.
And my mom.
But ever since then, you've just been rocking and rolling.
Yeah, you know, finding opportunities. Where are the gates that you can swing open? How do you get in there? Because it's a competitive market. The entertainment market here in Atlanta is fierce. Not just magic, but all kinds of entertainment is available. You probably know in the comedy
Absolutely.
circuit. So I've just looked for those doors and been lucky enough to find a couple of them where I could audition, and then all of a sudden have an opportunity in front of me, and I took full advantage of that. And
Wow.
the libraries, you know, the libraries is an interesting thing to talk about because, you know, they.
And that's what you're doing currently. Now you have coming up.
Yeah, coming up, I have sort of my library tour, if you can call it a tour. That opportunity to do a couple shows a day for different libraries and travel around Georgia has been amazing for me because I probably wouldn't have gone out and ventured that way. I probably wouldn't have seen these neighborhoods. I wouldn't have met these people. And it's given me a real appreciation of the state. I love it. I love everybody that I've met from South Georgia all the way up to the north and over near Savannah. I have had amazing amazing opportunities.
Wow.
So yeah, so then luckily that's just one small part. You know, there is the school system here, there is the club dates, and then there are corporate events. So there's lots of opportunity to spread the business out a little further.
Absolutely. And then plus, you know, word of mouth, everything.
Yeah.
Do a great show. What, you gonna perform some magic for us tonight?
I'm gonna do some magic for you guys tonight.
All right, you guys ready to see Brian do some magic for us tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good
Thank you,
chatting
Jeff.
with you.
Good
Listen,
chatting with you.
let me-
Thank
let-
you.
Let me get out of the way.
If everybody winning, who's lose? Man, who's lose? I'm trying to make it make sense. It's like it's so confused. I see the pain in your eyes from all the lonely nights. I swear I know how it